Okay, with
Yes, of course. And with the story.
one of the
Wait,
funnier
wait.
stories. What? Oh. Yeah, that's right, that's your job. Right, my job is use the mic. But do we really need the mic in here right now?
I think so.
Okay. One of the funnier stories I heard about Havdalah goes as follows. A woman was having Havdalah for the first time with the family of her fiancé. And she was a convert to Judaism. They were going to get married very soon. And as a convert, she knew all kinds of things about the history and the tradition and the law of Judaism, but she didn't know the folk habits. So her mother-in-law-to-be kindly gave her the Havdalah candle to handle. Candle to handle? It just gets worse. She gave her the Havdalah candle to hold, and she held it here, like a girl who had been brought up in the Episcopal Church, which is and the mother-in-law from across the room was going, she didn't know what that was about, so she stood there like this. The mother-in-law again goes, stands there like this. Finally, the mother-in-law comes over and raises her hand and says, "What do you want? Your husband should be a dwarf?" The girl had no way of knowing that the custom is you hold the Havdalah candle so the flame is right about where the top of the head of your partner-to-be is. And so, who here would like to hold the Havdalah candle?
I would.
Please.
Sometime I might know a partner. Good night.
We are not going to turn the lights off. If you know this place, you know what happens when you turn the lights off. Do you know what happens? Huh?
Forever to come back on.
Say it?
It takes forever to come back on.
That's right. And you're going to sit in the dark for a while.
That's it.
What else do you want?
Congregation ride.
Why don't they just say stand up?
Huh? Because they want not only the legs to be down and the head to be up, but they also want to rise up. At least that's what I mean. Congregation. Rise. All right. Hine. El Yeshuati eftach v'lo efad, ki aziv ezimat yad Adonai, vayhili Yeshua. U'she'aftem mayim v'sason, mimayne ha-Yeshua. Liyavish olam chaviratech eselo. Yad tzvaot imanu, v'yizkav lanu lehei Yaakov selo. Yad tzvaot asher yadam boteach bach. Yahoshia. Melech Yaninu v'yom kareinu. Did I forget the shot?
No, you did.
Okay. And we asked that God should help us as He helped us at that time that we celebrate on Purim and we say, La Yehudim hayta ora b'simcha b'sason v'yikar, and we wish, Kein tiyeh lanu, kos yeshut esav v'shem ya'ikra sabri. ברוך אתה יא אלוהינו מלך העולם בורא פרי הגפן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם בורא מיני ושמים. ברוך אתה יא אלוהינו מלך העולם בורא מאורי האש. ברוך אתה יא אלוהינו מלך העולם המבדיל בין קודש לחול, בין אור לחושך, בין יום השביעי לששת ימי המעשה. ברוך אתה יא המבדיל בין קודש לחול. המבדיל בין קודש לחול, חטאותינו ימחול. וחסדנו ירבה ירבה כחול, וככוכבים בלילה. זרענו וחסדנו ירבה. In between, I'll take them. Where was it?
הכוכבים בלילה.
שבוע טוב, שבוע טוב, שבוע טוב, שבוע טוב. Shavua Tov, Shavua Tov, Shavua Tov, Shavua Tov. So you got the sheets, and if we didn't have enough of them, then you have to share. On the way here, Eve was saying, too bad that we don't have any grown-up songs for Purim. But if you look at the way in which, how would I say, there's a feeling, it's very hard to describe that feeling in another way except to say, when I was a kid and I wanted to do something and I got to do it, it tickled me in the belly. Do you know what I mean with that feeling, you know? Okay, that's how the glee that we had when we would sing these songs. So ready?
Okay. Which one?
We'll start with Wicked, Wicked Man.
Oh, good.
Oh, once there was a wicked, wicked man, and Haman was his name. Sir, he would have murdered all the Jews, though they were not to blame, sir. Oh, today will Mary, Mary be. Oh, today will Mary, Mary be. Oh, today will Mary, Mary be. And not some lamentation. Oh, Esther was the lovely queen of King Ahasuerus when Haman said he'd kill us all. Oh my, how he did scare us. Oh, today will Mary, Mary be. Oh, today will Mary, Mary be. Oh, today will Mary, Mary be. And not some lamentation. But Mordecai, her cousin, what a dreadful chutzpah! If guns were but invented now, this Haman I would shoot, sir. Oh, today will Mary, Mary be. Oh, today will Mary, Mary be. Oh, today will Mary, Mary be. And not some lamentation. When Esther speaking to the king of Haman's plot made mention, said he, oh no, he won't, I'll spoil his bad intention. Oh, today will Mary, Mary be. Oh, today will Mary, Mary be. Oh, today will Mary, Mary be. And not some lamentation. The guest of honor he shall be, this clever Mr. Smarty, and high above us he shall swing at a little hanging party. Oh, today will Mary, Mary be. Oh, today will Mary, Mary be. So, the other song later on.
Come a little closer.
It is. All right. You know, singing those songs takes me back to 1947 in New Haven, Connecticut. And I don't know if you remember some of those songs that were there. Put another nickel in. Remember that? Right. So the thing that happened when I was a kid was that we had a whole routine. My cousins and I, we always dressed up into something so that we have our a certain kind of identity we took on for that occasion. And I didn't do so badly when I walked in high heels and like a girl and so on, so I even got this or that, you know.
Boggles the imagination.
I didn't have the beard then. So,
Oh, that makes it all better.
so then when we came to that uncle, and he was a nice man, that uncle. He was the rich uncle of the family. And so he would have lots of Purim spieler come to his house. But one of the things that you learned when you were a kid was, Heint is Purim, morgen is ois, gib mir a Grazer and warf mir a Reus. Which means, today is Purim, tomorrow no longer. You give me a penny and then send me out. So, I'm teaching it to the kids in the Chabad Hebrew school that we created in New Haven. Put another penny in, 'cause today we've got Purim. Achashverosh Mordechai. Haman was an awful guy. Naschen the oh, everybody got this share. Shalach monas everywhere. So that was one of it. The other one went, let me see if I can remember it. If I knew you were coming, I'd have baked a nash, a homentash, a baked a nash. If I knew you were coming, I'd have baked a nash. Amen. Down, 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 down. If you don't know what we came for, into your ear I shout. Uncle Jack, Auntie Jenny, make it fast, give me a penny, and then you can throw me out. So these were the songs that we made up, and that was part of the thing. So the question is still, what was that story? What's some early memories you got of Purim? None? Oh. This went someplace where it shouldn't be. Hold on for a moment.
You have less time than you think. Go right into the
Pardon?
story. You have less time than you think. Go right into the story.
Say it again.
Start the story.
You have a story?
You start the story.
That's what I'm going to do. Exactly. Before, when you were introducing Eve, I wanted to say A.K.A. Esther, Queen Esther.
Esther,
Yeah.
that's great.
Yeah, I'm supposed to be Mordechai. And,
Or the Rambam.
with the Rambam's hat. Did you, when you were in Hebrew school, did you have little scribblers that had Machberet HaRambam, right?
Yes.
And that's the kind of a hat he has there. So that's the latest from Cordoba. It was not easy to be a Jew during the time of the first diaspora. Nebuchadnezzar had come, had destroyed the temple, took captives with him, and later on his son Belshazzar, and there were people like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and you may have, if you don't remember them from the Bible, you heard them at least in the spirituals. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? Yeah. And Daniel in the lion's den, and all that stuff happened. The Medes and the Persians came in there, and they sacked the city where Belshazzar was, and that was the time when there was a handwriting on the wall. Remember those words, handwriting on the wall? It was a fiery hand that put words that nobody could understand, and finally Daniel came and explained what it meant. Mene, tekel upharsin, which translates into counted, weighed, and it's all known. So he came, explained what this was, the downfall of the Assyrian Babylonian kingdom, and the Persian and Median kingdom was created. Now you hear a description of a kingdom that was very, very vast. And if I wanted to say in those days, all the known countries, I would put it in that kind of language, from India to Ethiopia. 127 provinces. So you get a sense how they're talking about a huge country. Those empires, when you think of the Babylonian Empire, you think later on of the Indian empire of Emperor Ashoka, how far it went. It covered so much of Asia, and it came all the way to Asia Minor. So if somebody had an empire, that was a huge thing. How many languages were there? It was an amazing thing how many languages were spoken in such a kingdom. The closest we are to our day for that kind of a situation is the Austro-Hungarian Empire. When you think of German, Hungarian, Czech, Yugoslavian languages, Bosnian, and so on and so forth, all this was in one kingdom. So that has some bearing later on about the languages that we always hear about in the Megillah. And here is somebody who is an upstart, who because of the army that was in his pocket, as it were, became the emperor by marrying the daughter of the last emperor, Belshazzar, whose name was Vashti. And so you had a scene, and he is celebrating. He is now in charge. The Midrash says he has a throne built to look like the throne that King Solomon was sitting on. And he gets this party together and invites all the people to come and celebrate with him. And the description that you get of this guy in the Megillah is really strange. The king, yeah? Behavoto et osher kevod malchuto ואת יקר תפארת גדולתו ימים רבים, 80 יום. I'll translate. He's showing off the price tag of his beauty, of his splendor. The riches, first of all, the riches and then the price tags. And he isn't satisfied, but he takes everybody on tour. And the way I imagine him is coming out, see that Picasso over there? Brought me back 2 million, you know? And I could see him smoke a cigar, and, going around like a big shot, you know? That's how he's described, coarse guy. He overhears how people are... Huh? 180 days. So you can imagine what kind of a party that was. Yes, there was a rule that you had to drink a certain amount of wine. But the king said, whatever, the wine cellars are open. However much anybody wants to drink, let them have. And he told all the waiters, La'asot kirtzon ish va'ish, you are to satisfy just anybody's whim. So now he hears some people in the background saying, you know, that Achashverosh, that Grobayung, that Paskudnyak, the only reason why he's a king.
Nouveau riche upstart.
I'm translating.
Okay. You need a translator in Persian media for these things. Yeah. Where was that?
Mediator. You know that.
You know this
Upstart.
Grobayung, this king?
Say that. Say it again.
You know this Grobayung, this Paskudnyak?
Yeah, the Grobayung, the Paskudnyak, that's right. And they're talking behind him and he hears. The only reason he's king is because he's got her as his wife. And he, at this point, being drunk and boasting, says, "What are you talking about? I married her because she's purty." Right? And you know, it's like when you read the Megillah, not as a book, but you picture how the thing was going on there. So it comes out like this. And they say, "Show us," you know. So then he asked Queen Vashti to come without her clothes on. Okay. So
Wearing only her crown.
Huh?
Wearing only her crown.
Only her crown. That's right. Beketa Malchut, and nothing else. So what you get is, and she refuses. And here you get a wonderful description about how the king goes about finding out. He's calling his council together. But before he will tell anyone what's on his mind, he has to find out from his royal astrologers, 7 of whom were working for him. And the first one, the name of the first one is Krishna. Tarshana. That's the way it is. And if you look at the way in which there's written, you've seen the Krishna consciousness people, right? K-R-S and A, right? In Hebrew, it comes out Karshana, that way. And he is mentioned in the Megillah as being one of the first advisors. So if the stars are right, now he's going to get to hear from the lawyers, from the legal people. And he's trying to find out what should be done to the Queen Vashti. And the scene is so interesting because they're trying to find out what will be the consequences if you don't punish her. And the Megillah, if you can be present at the reading of the Megillah and it goes with the right trope, you hear that where the drama starts building up. If this is going to happen and all the women are going to tell the husbands, you got to listen to me rather than I listen to you. And there's this whole battle of the sexes at this point going on, and so therefore Vashti has to pay for it, and that's the beginning of that story. Okay. The rest begins with a lot of intrigue, and the question is, where are the Jews? Now, if you permit me something that's more ouchy for me. From India to Ethiopia. When I was in Bombay, I met there some Jews who were there since, their families, the Bnei Israel, were there since King Solomon's time. Long time. There. And if you check out what was happening in Afghanistan, and you figure that even today there are some tribes who are currently Muslims who come from Jewish background because they were some of those tribes from the 10 tribes that were sent away.
Oh.
And then you go further The graves of Mordechai and Esther are in a town called Hamadan, and that's in Iran. When you go to all the places where we were exiled to by the rivers of Babylon, which are in Baghdad, and that's where you have the Euphrates and the Tigris. And if you look at the settlements that we had in the Caucasian mountains, we had in Groznyj, we had in all those places, and wherever you have currently Islamic countries, we were seen as strangers, despite the fact that we had settlements there way before Islam spread. In other words, we have 400 years of Talmudic work done in what is now Iraq, prior to the birth of Muhammad, peace upon him. So you get the idea that in Egypt, where we had people like Maimonides, in Tripoli, in Tunisia, in Morocco, there you see all over that we can't be there anymore. But can you imagine what it was like to be a Jew in that kingdom? Because that was the only place where Jews were, between India and Ethiopia. And the story of Haman comes up. There's some subplots that come, but finally we hear about this guy Haman, who hates Jews and makes a deal with the king that 10,000 talents of silver is he going to put into the coffers of the king so that he might be able to destroy this people. And you hear this hanging over your head, that a year has been set and a date has been set, and once the king puts it as a law, it cannot be changed. So I'm going to stop right now here because we are... Okay, now continue. In 1938, in March, it was the 10th of March, Hitler marched into Austria, and I lived in Vienna at that time. It was so clear after the first few weeks what would be happening to us. There were those sad jokes that people had, you know, when you're the gallows humor. And some of them were taunts that the Nazis gave us. So when they asked you for your identity, they would say, "Sind Sie Arier oder lernen Sie Englisch?" Are you an Aryan or do you learn English? It was so clear that any Jew who was there wanted to go to a country where English was spoken. And the dread was that if you wanted to get any visa, you couldn't get any of them. In those days, there was another joke of that sort. A Jew goes into a travel agent and asks him, "Is there a place where you can sell me a ticket where they would let me in?" Because things were very, very hard for them. And the guy says, "Do you have a Taufschein? You know, have you been baptized?" And he says, "No." So he spins the globe and looks here and looks there and says, "No, there isn't a place where I can sell you a ticket. There's no place on this globe I can sell you a ticket to." So the Jew says to him, "Maybe you got another globe?" Now, do you understand the pain from which such a joke comes? And that was for a whole year that the people were under that terrible ban. Now, bam, ba-dam, bam, we go back a little bit in the story.
Go through the story.
Huh?
Go through the whole story, Zalman. I'm not going to shift gears.
Remember the business of all the languages. We don't have the same sense that we had when there was a king and a court and so on and so forth. But if you want to figure out the closest picture we have today, is figure the lobbyists in Washington. And if you could imagine just in Congress and the lobbyists are running around, they're trying to talk to this one, talk to that one. But what would happen in such a scene if there would be over 60 languages spoken? And then there are a couple of guys who are having a conversation, how they're going to take out the king himself, figuring that nobody would understand what they're saying to each other. But it turns out that Mordechai is there, and he speaks the language that those people were speaking. And he passes the word on, and it gets written into his chronicle that these two people wanted to kill the king, and because Mordechai was so kind that he gave, he saved the king's life, and he deserves to be honored. And it's an incomplete thing, because he deserves to be honored, but was anything done? So that's hanging there.
You really need to introduce Esther.
Pardon?
You need to introduce Esther.
I know, I'm going to come back to that. You want to tell me about Esther? Today, when somebody is called Esther, you'd want to say, that sounds like a Jewish name. It's the name of a book in the Bible. But if you can imagine, if you had to be anonymous, if your name is really Hadassah, but it's not good that people should know that you're Jewish, because your life is at stake. So what kind of a name would you take in that empire in those days? No, today if you wanted to pass, you call yourself Jennifer, Mary, something like this.
Mary.
Kristen,
Good.
So that's the same kind of a situation for Esther, who takes the name Ishtar, the name of that Babylonian goddess. It's interesting that her uncle is called Mordechai, which is another Marduk, another god of the Babylonians there. So Ishtar and Marduk is one of those great, great mythic tales that's going on. So what you hear is Ishtar and Marduk. Apparently, this was also a time of the year when people, like in that story that we have about Ahasuerus celebrating, other people were celebrating. Okay.
I'd really like you to finish the story.
So Ahasuerus no longer has a queen. So you get to hear the pages of Ahasuerus giving him good advice. Well, a beauty contest, You invite people from all over, all young girls, virgins, all from all over the country. Let them come present themselves to the king's court. And this is how we're going to go about it. After they will have been prepared to be available to the king for a night, they would be with the king for a night. They would be first in one house, and then after that night they would be in another house. And she would never come back to the king unless the king asked her by name. Like saying, remember last Thursday there was Fifi? I'd like her again, That's sort of the notion. Because all the others became very anonymous to him, and he didn't pay much attention to them. So it was like the opposite of Scheherazade with 1,001 Nights. It was 1,000 different kind of women who were there. And now comes the description of how they wanted to be presented to the king. And I can imagine that some of them had producers for that situation. Well, first of all, let's make sure that palanquin is going to be right, and you are to wear such and such a thing, a little bit revealing here and there, and they carry you into the king with this music and this fragrance. Can you imagine that? And they all come and they decide which way they want it to be, except Esther. When the time came for Esther to be brought before the king, lo biksha davar. So,
She
but
didn't
she
ask for a
had,
thing.
yeah, she didn't ask for a thing, right? Nothing to gild the lily. And it turns out, and again, as we read the Megillah, it's so beautiful. Let's go, how the trope makes it so strong and so beautiful. And when the king saw her, there was so much of grace and beauty that came up for him, and yes, and he made her his queen. Okay, so goes that story. She is now the queen in the place of Vashti. So tell me, my dear, what's your family like? Would you like some more tea? Ein Esther Magedet, Esther won't talk about her family and so on and so forth. Why? Because Mordechai told her, don't say a word, Mom, okay? So, Haman becomes more and more important to the king. First he was known as Memuchan, by another name, but as he rose in rank, he was one of the descendants of Amalek, and there was in him such a strong hatred for Jews that it was looking for the incident that would make like the match, on that gas. So Haman is raised by the king. The king sees him as second in command there. And they have carousing parties together. And I have such a sense of how he is a sniveling guy, but he knows how to manipulate this king. Always calls him by great ways and so on and so forth. And then says, Yeshno am echad, mefuzar u'meforat. There's this people, they're spread all over. They don't listen to your commands. They have their own protocols of the elders of Zion, By the time he tells that story, it becomes so that they are terrible enemies of the king. And why should he leave him? But he says there's going to be some trouble, and he says, all right, I'll cover the trouble. 10,000 talents of silver, and so on and so forth. And after they do this at a party, it gets written out, and here you hear again the Megillah describing that. They didn't have Xerox at that point, okay? So how are they going to do that? So in all those 127 languages, Medina or Medina Kichtava Bechilshona, in each country according to its script, they didn't even use the same alphabets, and in their language, a decree was made that the Jews are to be exterminated on that next day in the month of Adar. From babies to old people, everybody had to be destroyed. And here we hear of some Persian messengers, and he describes it that they were sent out in such a rush with horses all over the country in order to pass that word out of what happened. The king and Haman were very happy, it says, but the whole city of Shushan was in turmoil. Va'ir Shoshana bocha, using the melody of Eicha. Wherever the word arrived, Evel Gadol LaYehudim, there is great mourning, great upset, great terror to the Jews who are in that place. And Esther, being where she is, doesn't hear much about it. So Mordechai, her uncle, is walking up and down in front of the palace, usually any word, how's the queen doing, you know, because he wants to find out how Esther is doing. He couldn't call her on the phone. So Esther knows already when he is walking and looks out for him, sends him somebody with a message. And one day she sees him, the day after that decree has been announced, she sees him walk with sackcloth and ashes. You know, nobody here goes around in sackcloth and ashes. But I was in Gainesville just before the Iraq War. And there was a friend and student of mine who walked through the town in sackcloth and ashes on his head. Dennis. It was his way of demonstrating to the people how wrong it is what we are about to do. You get the idea? You're walking in front of the king's palace in sackcloth and ashes. It's terrible, you aren't supposed to do that. Doesn't everybody know that you mustn't do that? So she sends something out, he tells the story, and it gets to be so that she too is really getting upset about this whole thing, and we don't know what we are to do further. The decree is out that when people see Haman in the streets, they have to bow to him. Our rabbis tell us that not only did he want them to bow, because he knew the Jews would do that to a person, but besides that, he had, like a medal hanging here, an image of an idol, of a deity. And so he expected everyone who would see him, he would kowtow to him. So you can imagine, he's walking by and wants to see how Mordechai will behave with this. Mordechai lo yichra velo yishtachaveh, and Mordechai will not kneel and he will not bow down to him, and you get this. And Haman gets so incensed about it, but he is ashamed to make it just only on Mordechai. He has to include all the people, and this is how he came to the king with his request to kill them all. Esther wants to know, what can I do when she talks with Mordechai about that? And then he says, now is the time for you to go to the king and to plead for your people. The secret is going to be out. I don't know, I'm telling you this story, and is it getting warm, or are you getting tired, or are you getting bored because you know the story from before?
No.
Okay, so I'm going to continue yet a little bit more, okay?
Yeah.
So, they're thinking, we have a problem. The king set out a law, and once the king made a decree, you can't change it. Think about that, the unchangeability of a decree. But how are you going to handle that? Is there anything that can be done? The whole thing looks like lost, impossible. This is already going to happen. This is in the works. Forget it. Esther says, I'm going to go and plead, but there is something that you have to do.
At first, she isn't so willing.
No, she isn't willing to go and do that. But, Mordechai is saying to her, you know what? You think that you're going to hide here in this palace if I go back to the chanceries in Germany in 1935, 36, at the universities that were there, and there were many people who were Jews who were working for the government and in education and so on and so forth. Some of them who have changed their names in such a way that the names would not look or sound Jewish and were thoroughly assimilated. And they thought that they would be able to escape that decree, but they couldn't escape the decree. And so it happened in the same situation that Mordechai said, what do you think? You're going to be able to hide in the king's palace? You'll be found out. And you and your house and your parents and your whole family are going to be lost. So if you're going to be silent at this time, it's going to be bad. So Esther says, what am I going to do? How can I come to the king? It's very clear that if anyone comes to the king unbidden, they get killed. And again, you have that kind of immutable law. Achat dato lahamit. The law is so fully, strongly set that the person has to be killed. And nevertheless, she has to go. So she says, I'll risk it on one condition, that you and all the other people in the Jewish community will fast for 3 days. A fast of 3 days is considered to be really making a big difference. Do you remember the first time it was mentioned in history about the fast of 3 days? It is in the book of Jonah. Jonah comes to Nineveh, which was a city in Assyria, and warned the people that they would be destroyed. And they begin to fast and the king hears about that, and he says, we have to all repent. And the king says, all of us are going to be fasting for 3 days, and we will not even feed the animals at that point. So you get the sense 3 days fast makes a change. Therefore, Nineveh was not destroyed. We know that this might help. So Esther says, if you will fast for 3 days, I will go and see the king. And if I lose, I'll be lost. And again, v'chasher avadeti, avadeti. So the fasting is going on, and the people are praying, and so on and so forth. The whole book of Esther, not one mention of God. But all the people are really doing the pious thing anyway, because God is hiding. So she comes to the king, and the king sees her. I like to read the Megillah with some musical accompaniment. And so when the king sees her, ta ta da dee da 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 da, and he takes the scepter and holds it out forward for her. She approaches, touches the scepter, and she isn't killed. Yes. And the king wants to know, what can I do for you? And look at this wonderful generosity. Up to half of the kingdom, you can have it. The rabbis say, what does mean half of the kingdom? Half of the kingdom in between India and Ethiopia is Jerusalem. And he was saying, I'll give you anything you want except to rebuild that temple again. Okay? So the rabbis give an interpretation on that. Anyway, she says, no, I don't want half of the kingdom, but why don't you come? I haven't seen you, Ahasuerus, because she has said, it's been 30 days since I've not been called to the king. Vani lo nikreti lavo el hamelech. January 3rd. Right? And so the king hasn't asked from me, so at this point he says, so come tomorrow. And you know what? let's have Haman there too. This is a nice company. And the king likes to have Haman, his drinking partner, come, and so they arrange for that. Bum, ba-dum, bum. He walks out. He is so happy about this whole business, and you can imagine how elated he is, and he sees Mordechai once again, and he doesn't bow down to him. Every good feeling that he had about being invited to the king's party suddenly drains out of him. All that remains is this terror. Yes, really. We both are making those faces, right? And so he comes and tells his wife about it and says, look, everything, I had it so good. And here is this Mordechai. So she says, get rid of him. So he instructs people to build a gallows 50 cubits high. Now what's a cubit? It's about 100 feet. If you figure a cubit is 2 feet. Right? So maybe not, maybe 24 inches, 75 feet tall. So one of the Rebbe's was 6 years old at Tzemach Tzedek. He asked his grandfather, what do you have to do with such a 50 cubit high gallows? A shorter gallows would have helped too. So he says, it's a good question, I'll give you an answer. And then he gave a long, long teaching about why 50, and it had to do with Bina, and all went into great Kabbalah and so on and so forth. Anyway, it's being built, and it's done overnight, and in the morning he is ready to go to the king and tell the king, now is the time, I need to get your warrant, your agreement. This Mordechai, who has been one of the courtiers, we're going to hang him. Okay? He's on his way to the king, but meanwhile, bum, ba-dum, bum, he couldn't sleep. The king couldn't sleep. So then comes a wonderful description by the rabbis. So read me a little bit of the journals of our kingdom, of the chronicles.
That'll put me to sleep.
No. I don't think so. I mean, could you imagine our president can't sleep, okay? And then he would have someone, the chief of staff, he would say, would you read me the speech that I gave? Would you read me what Charles Krauthammer said about me? And Willis, what's his name? Will?
George Will.
Yeah. So I can imagine that would entertain him, So it got to that place, that one page, as he turns the page, he sees the story with Mordechai saving the king's life. He doesn't like that situation. He wants to turn the leaf again, but the wind comes and makes him put it back. The king says, what was written over there? Now you got to understand also that being a king in one of those Oriental kingdoms, do you realize what happened in Istanbul the night one of the caliphs died? There was a massacre right away of all the other children of the caliph, except one of them was left alive, and he became the next leader. Can you imagine if you were to be one of those children of the caliph, and all the intrigue that's going on in the back there? Could you imagine how Ahasuerus, who by this time is pretty paranoid, and nobody recently told him anything about any plots of his. And then he has it read, Mordechai saved your life at that time when they tried to poison you. And what was done for him? Nothing was done for him. Oh, Gewalt. I think of him saying, No wonder nobody tells me anything anymore. You know, someone who was a good whistleblower and I didn't reward him and so on and so forth now. So he's really very paranoid about these kinds of things and figures we really have to do a very special thing to honor that Mordechai. And so the king got ears like a paranoid person. He hears someone is coming into the palace. He says, Mi b'chatzer, who has been coming there? And Haman has come in the morning. So Haman comes up to the king, and before he can say anything to the king, Haman, he says, I'd like to ask you a question. There's somebody I want to honor. I want to really publicly declare my debt to him. And Haman is already feeling stronger and better about himself. He means me, he means me. So he says, and now here we got to listen to the rabbis interpreting because it's getting very interesting. First of all, he says they should bring the coronation garment that the king wore. And the king's horse that he used for the coronation. And they should put the crown of the king upon him. So the rabbis say, on the horse. And what he had in mind, that not that he should wear it, but he should ride the horse that has the crown, which is like saying Achashverosh is a horse with a crown, and who do you think is riding him? Cheney. Listen, I can't help it. It's the same kind of a situation. It is so clear, the same kind of a situation. So here it goes. So the king says, all right, go and do that. It's a wonderful idea, just as you described it, and do this to Mordechai the Jew. And make him go through the city, and you lead that horse, and you proclaim, da-da-da-da-ba-ba, thus shall be done to the man whom the king pleases to honor, delights to honor. No. So then again, the story is described. There's such a wonderful translation of the Megillah. It's called Targum Sheni. Thank you. The Targum Sheni, the second, you know what a Targum is? Thank you, Yeshikaya. Very good.
Is that good?
So, could you imagine him going through the street? By this time it's already afternoon. Thou shalt be done, man, the king is just to honor. He hasn't got a voice left anymore. And he feels very lousy having to say that. Meanwhile, his daughter, so the story goes according to that second Targum, the translation that amplifies the story and tells all kinds of things. He has a daughter, Haman, who has a potty prepared, figuring that when the father is going to come by with Mordechai, that she will pour it down, but it falls on his face. So finally he comes home and he has to prepare for the party, and it says he is sad, v'chafui rosh. He cleans himself up for the party, comes to the party, and again the king says, Esther, my dear, what is it, what can I do for you? And here she tells him the story. We
had the second party yet?
That's the second part.
That's the second part.
Yes, that's the second part. In fact, it says they came to rush and pick him up, you know. Vayav'ilu lahaviyat Haman. So he isn't quite ready, but they drag him quick, it's time to go to the king. So he hasn't got himself yet together, barely after this whole terrible day that he has. And he comes to the party, and then the king says, what can I do? And she says, I want you to know that I and my people have been sold for nothing. And you will have a loss. If at least they would have said, sell them as slaves, I wouldn't trouble you, my king. But they're going to kill us all. Who is this man? And here you have Esther pointing the finger, and I see the drama so strong. And the king is very upset about Haman. And Haman, and he gets up, goes into his garden. He has to integrate this whole business. Meanwhile, Haman falls on the canapé where she is resting to beg for his life. But it doesn't look like this to Achashverosh when he comes back. And he says, Gam lichboshet amalka imi babayit. He is trying to make it with the queen with me being here in the house. And so in those days they didn't have electric fans. So there was a guy standing there with a fan. His name is Charbona. And he speaks up and he says, and did you know, Your Majesty, that the man who tried to save your life, that he built the gallows to hang him on? And so the king says, hang him on that. Okay? So here you have the story. There's more yet to come, but I think I'm going to stop a little bit. Yeah, you tell something. Something now.
I'm going to finish the story.
Sure, better.
And here's a very interesting piece. So Haman is gone. Mordechai is in a place of honor. Esther is at least saved for the time being. And she says, and can you repeal the decree now and save my people? And here's the interesting thing. The king says, once a decree has gone out, it cannot be repealed. Once a decree has gone out, it cannot be taken back. So she says, then at least can you send messengers all over to let the community know that we have the right to arm and defend ourselves and to kill the enemies who would kill us. That can be done. That can be done. It's a very interesting point. And so this is what happens. And they even take a few extra days to finish off whoever would have killed them.
Please, I think it's time.
So there are two things that I find very, very interesting about Purim. One is that it is, except for a certain state of mind you can get into on Yom Kippur, it's the only time in the year in our tradition where, I mean, what does it say about celebrating Purim? It says you should get so fashloshkid that you
that
don't...
means drunk.
It's usually the opposite here. So drunk that you can't tell the difference between cursed be Haman and blessed be Mordechai. So here it is. It's a not quite spring celebration, and it's the only one that resembles Mardi Gras or Saturnalia, ancient Roman celebration, where you reach the state of mind where you pop out of the drama for a moment or for a day, and you see that we are all playing the assigned roles, and Haman is playing his just as he's supposed to, Mordechai is playing his just as he's supposed to, and the worth of either actor is in how well they play the role, not in the role itself. That is, you get to take a peek at the drama from outside the drama. Now, there are other traditions where this viewpoint is emphasized, and that's where you are aiming to be most of the time. This is not the Jewish tradition, to be there most of the time. We rather have the tradition where we're in the drama most of the time. Oh, I hear recognition there. And once in a while we pop out and say, and this is Lina, this is play. This is the drama. And it's not the entire reality. So this is one of the times we're doing this, one of the few times we do this. And what else is going on? Well, first of all, you pointed out all these things of exquisite timing. It is a story that, Purim, Pur is a lot, but people don't want to hear from lots.
I Ching.
I Ching or chant, the ways you throw dice, or you throw I Ching, or you have a bunch of straws that are the same length except for one, etc. And you choose something that has to do with chance. So the day on which the massacre was to have happened, Haman picked by luck, by chance. The fact that Mordechai had rescued the king from an assassination plot, a piece of chance. The fact that the niece of that very man became the queen, one could say that was chance. And in the entire Megillah, God's name is not mentioned as such, although there is much mention of Hamelech, the king. And there are those, of course, the commentators who say every time they're mentioning Hamelech, who are they talking about? The fact that who afflicted, why was the king afflicted with insomnia at just the right time, and just the right page came up. And at the moment that Mordechai is being honored, you see the wheel of fortune turns for Haman, and there begins his downfall. Everything that he's planned begins unraveling from that moment. So there are all these pieces of what we would call synchronicity, or serendipity, or fate, or kismet, operating throughout this whole story. So there are all these layers. One is watching the play from outside the play. One is seeing the exquisite timing in this particular play. And then there's the business that's striking me the most at this point in this year, and that is, what has to happen for any of these pieces of timing to actually result in saving something good? And that hinges upon Esther. Ishtar, Nistar, the hidden one, something hidden. First of all, she's hiding her identity in the palace. And whatever strength she may have is also hidden, also from her, until Mordechai calls it out and she has to decide, yes, I will risk that the king is in a bad mood and I come unbidden and he doesn't extend his scepter, and I'm executed instantly. That's a real possibility. It's as real a possibility as the opposite. And so she says, this is the point at which I got to put up or shut up. I either try to save my people's life somehow, or the truth is, yes, Mordechai's right, I'll be killed with the rest of them, most likely. But it takes that moment of courage, and she conscripts the whole community to support her in a day of fasting and prayer. And what is a fast? A day of fast and prayer? As we know mostly from Yom Kippur, it's a day in which we don't allow our usual distractions to distract us so that we can center into what's really going on. So she asks the supportive community that everyone also concentrate and not be distracted with her. Maybe this influences the frame of mind of the king, but it certainly supports her in her courage to go do what has to be done. And everything shifts from there. The whole story shifts. Do you want to take this, or shall I take it? So, of course, what are we talking about here? And what are we talking about here? Well, we're in a situation in the world today where all kinds of populations are being threatened with extinction. Genocide is being practiced on various groups of people throughout the world. And, of course, many different species, both animal and plant species in our world. I know that this is the point at which, with good reason, all our paranoia is stimulated. So, for instance, whenever I am over the internet sending out all those letters to politicians or to editors or to papers and so on, And I notice, for instance, when I call up the websites that I'm being asked to do something with, how often something is blocked, you can't get through, you wonder. And of course it occurs to me, yeah, it's a real possibility that somebody can keep track of who's sending what to whom, and we're going to hear about it later, or the IRS will get on my tail, or life will be made miserable in one way or another. And my feeling is, that can't stop anyone.
Yeah.
So, if anybody is willing, I'd like to lead an exercise in your imagination about what's worth something and what we're willing to do. If anybody doesn't want to do this, that's fine, just keep your eyes open. If anybody does, uncross your legs and hands and close your eyes. Can you hear me easily with your eyes closed? This is how you find out if you've actually been reading lips, don't laugh. Breathe out easily 3 times. And know what it is in your world close to your heart that needs to be saved. Breathe out and know what it is for which you would be willing to risk your life. Breathe out. Imagine doing this. What happens to you and what is the result in the world? Breathe out and know what kind of support and concentration you must ask for to be able to do this in the world. Breathe out and knowing what you're willing to do and what you must do, open your eyes. Please find somebody, a partner, to speak to, and I'm going to ask you to narrate your journey during this exercise in the most brief, non-annotated way. Or as we would say, just the text, not the Rashi. Just the text. You don't have to tell anybody any of your associations to any of that. That's for you. Just narrate and then hear from your partner.
That's what I thought about.
Begin to wrap it up.
for me, such and such happened. Could we hear from you?
To speak in the present tense.
I'll give you the mic, come up.
What came up for me was the work as an activist, ecology, community. Rocky Mountain Peace and Justice Center is listed as a terrorist organization, and yet it's still important to speak up. Thinking of Pastor Marcus Niemöller.
What kind of, when you asked in the exercise, what kind of support do you need to garner to do what you need to do? Did anything come up for you?
Email, networking, prayer. Prayer. Prayer has saved my life and my soul.
If you had the mic set, pick the thing closest to your heart to save. I said, well, then I need to save Bob because he's closest to my heart. So then when you started to ask some of the other questions, I thought, oh, well, this isn't what I was supposed to say. But I thought, but I said it, so I have to go with it. And so I said, but of course, I'm going to be saving Bob because he has important work to do in the world. And so what kind of support do I need to do that? We all need to tell the truth, is what came up. And then the last thing was, you know, when you said what we need to do, I said, well, I need to save Bob and also the birds too.
What I thought of first was Israel. I would die for Israel, but it's such a complicated bunch of issues that I couldn't really figure out exactly how. And then I thought of Rabbis for Human Rights who do work that tries to keep government policies moral, and by joining such an organization I would feel the support that I would need if I were there to actually work there with them. At this point it's only a matter of sending money. But I think it's really important that a segment of the Jewish population that's knowledgeable about Jewish law can call people to account who are doing things that are immoral in terms of policy.
Thank you.
We took you on this journey about the story and something about the meaning. And I just want to say one more word about this business of transcending. Blessed be Mordechai, cursed be Haman. We can always find some people whom we want to say they are to be blessed and the other ones to be cursed. And when you read the Megillah and you picture it before yourself, you get a sense of a melodrama. You know the old melodrama? They tie up the girl on right? And there's a guy with a black cape and so on. And it is very much that kind of a thing with the last minute rescue and so on and so forth, and the comeuppance on the bad guy in the end. Now imagine you have seen this in a theater and it was done very beautifully. And as Esther is saying to the people, so from now on, you have to celebrate this holiday every year, and all the other things and that the king has done and so on and so forth are written in the annals of Persia and Media, and Mordechai is raised by the king to be the great person, and Mordechai walks by again, you know, and the curtain falls. And then the curtain rises again, and everybody comes up. And if the guy who played the villain did a good job, he also gets applause. That is a place in which most of the time we can't put our head into that. But once a year, in order not to be so stuck in our enmities, we need to be able to say, twist it all around, turn it all around. look at the masks we are wearing and play with masks and so on and so forth. So I just wanted to say this, but the important issues are to listen to the Megillah, to give charity to the poor, gifts to the poor, matanot le'evyonim, and to send presents one to another. And I do hope that in the parties that people will celebrate for Purim, they'll be able to remember to look at Hamas at this point as a possible source of blessing. It's not easy. Most of the year it might be very hard, but Purim is a different story. And it is by making that possibility of that switch, which goes higher than 50 cubits, into the place of Bina and higher than Bina into Keter, where the switch is being made. And that's what we celebrate on Purim. Now, if you have any questions that you would like to raise or any remarks you would want to share, insights you want to share, we'll give you the mic. We'll take a few minutes to do that. Please.
I have a question, and I don't think I need a mic. Why is it that the Jews prefer to take this peek, this overview, only once a year? What is the purpose of that? Why is it that we like to be in the drama most of the time? And what is the purpose of other traditions that prefer to be outside the drama? Is it just different organs functioning in the same body? Or could you elaborate on that?
Well, there's so many things you're touching on. It's not simple. But let me say, once you get a glimpse, I like that bumper sticker.
Don't believe everything you think.
Okay. And so if once a year you get to the place where you don't believe everything that you think for the rest of the year, and you look at it and see it's a construct, it isn't reality, that's very helpful to have this at least once a year. If someone says to me that other people don't have stories or dramas or myths, it's not true. It's not true. I go all the way from the Epic of Gilgamesh, all the way to the Passion that was shown, to Arjuna and
The Mahabharata.
the Mahabharata, the Gita, and so on and so forth. There's so many stories around. Everybody has a story. And if you hear the stories in Vajrayana Buddhism and in Hinayana Buddhism, there are stories in them all. Because life in this situation is this kind of a drama. The question is, when I'm so stuck on it that I can't see another point of view, then I'm in real trouble. So if I were to be a president and I make a cabinet of people who always will say yes and nobody is going to wake me and say maybe it ain't necessarily so, then I'll be in the story and I won't be able to get out. So once a year it would be wonderful. I can imagine what kind of a l'chaim I would want to make with our president on Purim. Maybe a little ayahuasca.
South American psychedelic herb.
Yes.
Well, I just wanted to say that
Say it louder, loud.
the first Gulf War started on Bet Shvat, the second day of Shvat, in 1991. Al-Shalem? 1991. And it went until 1992? No, he's 14 now. Right, so it was 1991. And it went until it ended in Tel Aviv on Purim. And because I'm from Jerusalem, so it was actually before Purim for us. But there really was a sense of living under this very big cloud, because every time it would get dark at night, we didn't know if we were going to be bombed, and we had to go into sealed rooms and put our children into well, Chovav was too, so it was like a little plastic thing, and put on gas masks and close ourselves. And Israel was bombed 17 times. And then the war ended on Purim, and it really felt like nafochu, that we were in this very place of darkness, and then it was this joyous holiday of celebrating our redemption from this potential destruction. And the next winter, which is when I was pregnant with my son Shalev, who's born on Bet Shvat, which was the day the war began, and he's called Shalev, which means tranquility, was the most rainy winter we had in 40 years. And I have always felt that, there was that period of time where we all prayed, like it was like all of Israel was just in this mind of, I think, unity of praying that we would get out of that war. And then the next year we had a very abundant rainfall.
And the snows.
It's so amazing as you're describing this, because the Purim that we have isn't the only Purim. There's a Purim of Saragossa, there is a Purim of Prague, there are all kinds of Purims that we had, situations where things look like we won't be able to survive them, and the last minute miracle came and so on. One of the outstanding Purims of that sort is the 9th day of Pesach, which is the Purim of Prague. How did that happen? There was a plot that the bread that was going to be baked for Jews to eat after Pesach was to be poisoned. And the word got around, and Rabbi Yehuda Leib of Prague, the great Rabbi Leib, had them gather that bread from the various bakers, and they fed it to dogs, and the dogs died, and they were able to find out who was behind the whole thing. It was a priest by the name of Thaddeus. It was a heavy, heavy story. So from that time on, the people in Prague would eat matzah for 9 days, and the 9th day of Pesach was called the Purim of Prague. So in every family there are stories of this sort when, for some refugees when they came to America. For us, the day before Pesach is such a thing. That's when we arrived in the United States. One more, and then we'll sing another song.
I understand that the word Esther means hidden, and it's like God is hidden in the whole story, but I'm trying to figure out what more that means.
Well, the rabbis say Esther min haTorah minayin. That goes off in a long shmuz. It has something to do. Some people don't like the book of Esther to be a section of the Tanakh. So you can imagine that there was a big argument because when was it written? It was written already, after the destruction of the first temple and so on. So should we deal with that book of Esther or not with the book of Esther? So the rabbis say, is there a place in the Torah that would point to the book of Esther? So it says that when God found that we were sinning, he said, I will hide my face on that day. Va'anochi haster haster et panai be'et hahi. So we get from that. Now the question has been, during the time of the Holocaust, many people were having big theological issues about where is God in all this? So they would take that expression as found in the Talmud of Hester Panim. It's not that God wasn't here, but he was hiding his face, as it were. And so you get the connection of Esther with that. Today, it would be nice to be able to go and visit the grave of Esther and Mordechai in Hamadan. It's in Iran, but they won't let us today, despite the fact that the Muslims also honor that shrine. So amazing for us to see. So, Purim. I do hope that whatever things have to turn for you, that they should turn for you on Purim at that point. And that you should be able to say to everybody, a good Purim, and there's a wonderful long story which I won't tell you right now. Because it's time that we should sing the last one, and then we call it an evening. And there will be more happening on Purim. I hope to be in Yesod Hashem with Neve Kodesh for the night of Purim, and at Bonnet, the morning afterwards, for reading the Megillah. Da 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 dum da 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 dum da 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 Oh, Haman was a high-minded bluff in Shush long ago. He ordered Mordecai to take his derby off in Shush long ago. So we sing, and raise a row. For Haman he was singing while Mordecai was singing in Shush long ago. When Mordecai sat and laughed in his face in Shush long ago. So Haman swore he'd exterminate his race in Shush long ago. So we sing, and raise a row. For Haman he was singing while Mordecai was singing Shush long ago. Oh, Esther was a timid little maid, Shush long ago. But Mordecai told her she needn't be afraid, Shush long ago. So we sing, and raise a row. For Haman he was singing while Mordecai was singing Shush long ago. So she went to the king and she gave him a smile, Shush long ago. And the king liked her manner and her style, Shush long ago. So we sing, and raise a row. For Haman he was singing while Mordecai was singing, and Shush long ago. Ashverosh was a jolly little king in Shush long ago. He ordered Haman to take a little swing in the Shush long ago. So we sing, and raise a row. For Haman he was singing while Mordecai was singing. Shush long ago.